was very proud of my dad, who every morning would dress up in a handsome suit with a freshly starched white shirt and tie and head off to the Naval Research Lab in Washington, D.C., where he did his important work. When my father would come home in the evening, it was a different story. It was a different dad. My father rarely came directly home from work. He usually stopped by the bar to grab a few. When he would arrive home, it would usually be drunk, and he would be slovenly, and he would plop himself down on a couch and go to sleep. This was a pattern that continued through my childhood. At 14, when I was 14, my parents separated. My dad lived away from our home, and he would visit on certain occasions, usually drunk. I remember the one occasion when he came to our house and was in the house, and he grabbed my brother's baseball bat, and he actually smashed our one and only television in front of us. It's quite shocking. Another time, my mother didn't allow him to come into the house because of the former incident, and so my father took my little brother's tricycle and threw it into the house through our dining room window. One of the last recollections I have of my father when he was drunk, before we moved from Maryland all the way across the country to the wonderful state of Nevada and Reno, was an incident where my father took his car and was ramming it again and again into the back of my mother's parked car in front of our home. Very embarrassing and humiliating. It was a summer day, and we lived in a very nice suburban neighborhood. Well, needless to say, these experiences colored my feelings about alcohol and drunkenness. And so I carried these feelings and these fears of not wanting this into my life, into my young adulthood. So much so that when I came across a religion, the LDS religion, the Mormons, and finding out that they had a certain part of their religion called the Word of Wisdom that advised against drinking coffee and tea and smoking and no drinking of alcohol, I embraced it immediately because I thought it would keep me safe, that it would keep my future family safe. Well, interestingly enough, even with that focus and that intention, I soon met and married a man who was a return missionary, oldest of 7 children. We married, and very soon after that, I discovered that I married a closet binge alcoholic. I dealt with this for 18 years of marriage. Go figure. Precisely the thing I was focused on that I would not have in my life is what I brought to my life. Now, let's go to another part of my life. Now we're in 1982, September of 82. I've just delivered my 5th baby. And my phone rings, and a special friend who owns a particular fitness type of program called Celestial Bodies called me up with a challenge. She said, "How would you like to be our next Mrs. Utah?" I first laughed at her and said, "Suzette, of all people, you know I'm married and I have 5 children. I could not possibly run for Miss Utah." She said, "You did not hear me. I said Mrs. Utah." And I'd never even known there was something like that. So I thought, boy, I've got to take on this challenge. This is an opportunity that I can't pass up. So my husband immediately, upon finding out that there was a swimsuit portion of this competition, also said, "Get in this swimsuit. I'm going to take a before picture of you, and you better work some kind of major miracle in the next 4 months, because otherwise you're going to be embarrassing yourself and me in this running." Well, I put all of my attention in this. From that moment on, my friend came to my home at 5 a.m. every morning, and from 5 till 7 a.m., we worked out so hard. I ate properly. I studied. I prepared. I focused. I was consumed with this objective of running and winning the Mrs. Utah pageant. The end of the story is I did win. And for all of that work and intensity and focus, I ended up making it as a finalist in the Mrs. America pageant that year also. What I'm trying to share with you in these two diverse stories is that I have discovered that we always get what we focus on. Life doesn't just happen to us. That depending on what we focus on, whether it's intentionally, as I did in the Mrs. America pageant and the Mrs. Utah pageant, or whether it's unintentionally, like what I brought to myself with not wanting alcoholism in my life, we bring it to us. We bring it to our lives. And so I've discovered that because we draw what we focus on, and we are always focusing on something, it's how we're wired. And you will always, always, always get that which you focus on. I've devised a little game to try to help myself to focus on what I want and not what I don't want. And I've given all of you a little rubber band. You might put it on your right wrist and check in with yourself every few minutes, or maybe every hour on the hour. Maybe when you take the time and say, every time I'm going to sip some water or take a drink, I'm going to remember, put this rubber band on your right wrist. And when you take the sip of water, check in with how you're feeling. Your feelings will be a good indicator of what you're focusing on. Whenever you have any negative emotion, it usually will identify for you that you are on a negative wanting. And whenever you have positive emotions, you will be knowing that you're safe and okay. Whenever you find that you're on a negative one, switch it over to your left hand and try to think of its opposite. When you've identified that and make it positive, bring it back over to your right hand. I promise you, if you pay attention, if we wake up to what we are thinking about and focusing on, we can create the life we know and love and want. Mr. Toastmaster.